What's up, everybody? I'm Justin Maytat here with my sister, Melissa Matak,
Hey, everybody.
and we are Room 51, podcast where we talk all things board gaming. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, designer and co-founder of Stonemaier Games, Jamey Stegmaier.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
We were so excited to have you.
Super pumped. And today, we are doing a Roll for Thought. It's a weekly segment where we talk about something that we think is worth discussing in the board gaming universe. Today, we're going to be discussing when the theme of a game lends itself to teaching the mechanics of the game and understanding the game. So, Jamey, since you are our guest, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, yeah. I have some few examples here that those who are watching on YouTube will be able to see. I'll mention one. Maybe you guys can jump in. I thought this would be a great topic for you, especially Melissa, in the way that you make your videos about how to teach games. I thought you might have some great insights about how to use theme as a conduit towards understanding mechanisms. And for my first example, I'll use a Deep Sea Adventure. Have you two played Deep Sea Adventure?
I have
I
not.
have not. I've heard of it, but no, I haven't.
Okay. It's a little game, and it's fairly abstract in terms of the components. So it's just dice and tokens and a few meeples. And the theme of the game is that you are competitively diving down under the surface of the ocean to grab treasures and then make your way back up into the boat with those treasures. And when I teach this game, I really love how the core theme of the game is that you are sharing oxygen with other players, even though you are competitively playing against them. And that core idea in the game makes the explanation of teaching this shared resource really easy, because it's very intuitive to say to players, okay, you're all sharing oxygen and you're diving down under the ocean. There's a little track in the game that's used to keep track of oxygen, but I've never found anyone, I've always been able to just say that once, and anyone who's learning the game completely understands it. And also in the game, you are, as I said, you're gathering treasures, and they make you heavier as you try to swim back up or even further down to gather more treasures. And so I find that really a helpful mechanism and thematic explanation for understanding the mechanism of, as you gather more treasures, you get heavier and you use more oxygen. So I like the combination of those two things. It has made the game really easy for me to explain.
Yeah, when you first, because Jamie was actually the one who came up with this topic for us, and when I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about my Teach the Teach segment, and like how I teach games, and it's true. I feel like the theme can really help me teach games better and have it like instill into people's minds. And one game that I was thinking about was Captain Sonar,
Yeah.
where I think that with each of the roles, it makes sense what you're doing. Um, it's a little bit of a bear to teach because you have to teach each one, but it's not incredibly difficult to teach it, I find. And this is one that I think, because the theme and the mechanisms involved with portraying that theme, I think that it allows for people to remember it for the next time we play. So I was also thinking about that in terms of, okay, what games are easier to teach because of the theme and makes people remember it because of the theme. But then I was also thinking about games where uh, it's difficult to remember, even though the game is just oozing with theme. Something like Robinson Crusoe, I
Right.
think, is like oozing with theme, and it makes it a little bit easier, I think, to teach it because it makes sense what you're doing. But oh my goodness, I can never remember for the next time I'm playing that game. I'm like, I have to relearn all the rules because there's all these little things involved to push the theme, but it's difficult to remember.
Right. That makes me think of War of the Ring.
Yes.
How that game is so oozing with theme, but like even the first time we played it, how many times did we have to go back to the rule book? We would read it and be like, "Oh, that makes complete sense." And then the next time we did it, it's like, "Wait, how exactly does that work?" And then we would read, "Oh, that makes complete sense." Like it kept being like that. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
something I have a video about, like how to design a board game. And I have my own methods. There are many different methods to do it. But one thing that I try to remember myself and to share with other designers is that as you are playtesting a game and teaching it, whenever you use the word remember, I just used that word a second ago, whenever you have to say remember to your playtesters, that to me is a verbal cue that the user interface of the game isn't helping players remember all that information. And so whenever I say that word to a playtester, remember to do this, that's a cue to me to like improve that UI so that you don't have to go back to the rule book, or you don't have to remember that that fiddly thing in whatever game that you're teaching.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I think I might have watched that because that sounds familiar to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's true. Like a lot of it going into the designing aspect of it. Not that I've ever designed a game, but being from the player's point of view, if I so first I think even just like the player sheet or the
Mm.
player aid rather, if that is really well done, that's good too, right? Like and along with the theme and the mechanisms propelling that theme
Mm.
and making it all make sense pretty much is good. And another game I was thinking about was Galaxy Trucker,
Mm.
where
Okay.
I think that has a lot going on in it and it could be challenging to teach because again there's all these different special abilities and I don't think that really comes with a player aid, but
No.
yeah, right. And
Yeah.
I don't have any difficulties remembering though what all of these things do. I
Hmm.
think again because I mean the pictures themselves are almost like the player aid. It's like yes, this kind of looks like a shield. So
Yeah.
and yeah, this looks like a what is it, a missile or whatever.
Laser.
And
Yeah.
or a laser,
Mm.
right? And the theme makes it easy to understand like yes, okay, a shield obviously would block things coming at me, these lasers will shoot the things in front of me. Even I guess like the one, I don't even know if it's a fiddly thing, but it's more of like a restriction where you can't have something directly in front of the lasers. That still makes sense to me because of the ship going
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you
Or
know.
directly
Yeah.
behind the
Right.
thrusters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it all makes sense and it makes it easy specifically to remember. Maybe not so much to teach. It could be a little bit more difficult to teach that game just because there is so much going on and players have to kind of remember everything. But I think
Mhm.
once you play it the first time and then you're going into the next time you're playing it, you're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense thematically, and I pretty much remember how to play this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing though that I haven't experienced is like you said, Galaxy Trucker, laser made sense. Nothing should be in front of a laser that's gonna shoot a missile. I haven't gotten to experience though playing a game where the theme isn't something I'm familiar with. So I was thinking about Baseball Highlights 2045. I'm a huge baseball fan. So that the mechanics made perfect sense and everything. I'm wondering how it is for somebody that has not a clue about baseball. Like I don't know what first base is, nothing
Yeah.
like that. What's a single, what's a double. I'm curious what the experience is for that, and if it actually might make it harder for them to understand the game. I'm not sure though. Yeah.
I'm looking at my pile of examples to see if there's anything like that in there, and there isn't. But that's a great point. That if you, no matter how well the theme explains the mechanisms, if you don't know that theme very well, or even, we haven't designed spaceships in real life. The three of us haven't. I don't think. Maybe you have, but that makes sense because we've seen movies where spaceships are used. But I bet that there are games where the theme would normally help, but it doesn't help someone who doesn't know that theme. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like Brass Lancashire,
Hmm.
uh, very slightly familiar with the idea of the canal and then railroad era. But really, in that game, I don't find that the theme helps make sense of the game for people. It's more like, so here's a bunch of mechanics. Oh, and here's why they chose those mechanics. And like the
Right.
robot kind of lets you know, but it doesn't actually do anything for me. It's just more like, oh, cool. They didn't just put in this mechanic. It was just something theming that they added, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge theming kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
One game I was also thinking about that, um, again, like sort of propels like the theme and everything is Millennium Blades,
Mm.
where that one kind of does come with a player aid. But it's interesting because it's part of the game because you're actually building your deck and everything on there.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is set collection. And I guess like I was thinking about this, and this one I felt was one that it works so seamlessly. Like you don't even quite notice, or I didn't quite notice how much the theme actually helps me remember the rules because it could have just been like a set collecting Euro game or something, right? But
Mhm.
instead, they have the theme like, yes, you're set collecting for your collection, right? Like you're
Mhm.
collecting cards. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And you want like different cards, which also makes sense because you don't want to have a collection of all the same card. So there's that. And then even just like the deck building prospect of it, where um, okay, I'm playing out this line of cards, and this is like the highlight of the tournament and everything, and all of that makes sense to me. Whereas if it didn't have that theme wrapped around, and it was just kind of, yeah, you're just sort of doing this, like a lot of Euro games kind of do, um, I might have a more difficult time first teaching the game, but then also remembering how it's played. But
Mhm.
because it's wrapped around in like, yes, this is a CCG, you're playing in a tournament, you're like this famous CCG collector and player and everything. It's like, yes, okay, that makes sense to me. And like my brain can wrap my head around that. Uh, but then the uh, opposite of that, because I was even speaking a little bit earlier of how a game could be, it could have a lot of theme in it wrapped around, and like I can understand that, uh, but trying to remember how that plays, I'm thinking of Battlestar Galactica, the board game, and that one has a lot of rules in it. Uh, and I even think that partially maybe it's the rule book that could have been a little bit better. I think that's another thing that goes into, helping to teach the game, helping to remember the game. Uh, but yeah, Battlestar Galactica has a lot of theme in it. I feel like, yes, I'm in the TV show. I love the TV show, and I talk about Battlestar Galactica all the time on this podcast. But that is one that I have a hard time remembering the rules, and even a little bit of a difficult time teaching the game because there is so much going on. Although you don't have to teach them everything, you could kind of control everything, but then you really do have to remember everything that's going on in the game. So those are just a couple of examples that I was thinking about.
Yeah, yeah. I have two filler examples. You guys have
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
some heavier games, right, which I think are great. They're probably more important than fillers to explain the theme. But the two fillers that I thought of were Ink and Gold.
Uh-huh.
I've taught this many times because it's very easy to teach, very easy to play. And the one thing that I really like about this is the idea of choosing when you're going to run. So Ink and Gold, for those who haven't played it, is a game about kind of competitively going into a dungeon fairly abstractly, gathering some treasure along the way in, and then on the way out you can choose, on your turn you can choose to either stay in the dungeon and go further or run out and gather any treasure that you've left along your path. And uh, one thing that I found really easy to explain is as you're leaving treasure along the way, uh, the choice to run out is defined by who else is going to run out with you. And so if there are 5 pieces of treasure, 5 pieces of like gems left along the path, and you run out by yourself, you'll gather all of that treasure on your way out. You'll gain 5 gems. Whereas if you run out with another player or multiple players, then you have to split up those gems. This is one of the things, kind of like with Deep Sea Adventure, where the first time I explain it, it makes perfect sense because everyone can look at this path of gems and think, okay, I want to be the only one to run out. And obviously, if I'm the only one, I get to gather all that stuff on the way out. And the other little filler I thought of is For Sale, which I just happened to teach last night. Without the theme, it's a fairly abstract game, but the theme itself makes it a lot easier to understand and teach because you are acquiring properties and then selling those properties for different values. And even though the properties themselves are just cards numbered 1 through 30, you could have no theme on that at all, 1 through 30. The idea of an escalating type of property. So like, at 30, you have this beautiful space station, I think, and at 29, you have a palace and things like that. So the art and the theme on the cards defines the value, shows you that they're more valuable than others. And it makes sense when you're teaching the game that the more valuable cards give you more money or a better chance at more money when you try to sell those properties.
Yeah, I really need to play those two games because I feel like I would
Same.
love those, especially Ink and Gold. I love push your luck games.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I'm leaning
yeah,
towards For Sale. I've
yeah,
considered buying that a few times. Yeah.
yeah, same. Yeah, both of those games. I almost got Ink and Gold. I was trying to find it at PAX when I went. I didn't find it, and then I wound up just like not even ordering it for whatever reason. But that is one that's on my list.
I think both are on. I just tried Board Game Arena last night, which I'd never tried, but I was really impressed by the interface. And I think both of them are on there. We played For Sale on Board Game Arena, and I think I saw Ink and Gold on there too. So you could try it there without having to buy it first.
Yeah, wow,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
yeah, I gotta check that out then.
Me
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Yeah, I
And
haven't really used Board Game Arena.
I tried it once. I was actually having issues. I'm gonna try it again though,
Okay.
because I very much want to.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's interesting though, because you mentioned how maybe the heavier games it's even more important than the fillery games. And one thing for me is, so with a heavier game, I love when I can break out a 2 hour game and teach it without having to reference the rulebook once. It's like, no, I
Oh yeah.
remember it. Everything is there. It's awesome. But one thing that I think is really important with those filler games is it should be an easy teach. I
Mhm.
don't want to spend 40 minutes teaching a 20-minute game. You
Right.
know, I don't like that. And it sounds like both of those games, or actually, really all three games that you've mentioned, you've only explained the theming of it, and it's like I'm pretty sure I know at least half the game already. You know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and that to me is such a fantastic experience for everybody. You know, the
Mhm.
teacher feels good because they're getting the game played as quickly as possible. The players
Right.
feel good because they're going to start the game knowing why they're playing it and like how to play. You know, I think that the theming is what also will engage the players more. You
Mhm.
tell them the theme, and then all right, now they're tuned in, and then you tell them the mechanics, and it's like it all sticks together. That
Yeah.
those kinds of games, it's really important with fillers, in my opinion, to really get the that game played as quickly as possible. You want that to just be played, you know, like
Totally.
not taking forever.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. I even like what you said, Justin, about I want to know why I'm playing the game,
Mm.
because that's always the way I teach games. That's the first thing I do is like I tell the story behind the game. And I even mention that in Teach the Teach because I want players to know, like, okay, but like, why am I doing the things I'm doing in this game anyway? And I think theme really does help with that because even with games like abstract strategies or Euros that don't really have a theme, there's some sort of, they usually give some sort of story behind it, and I'll say it, I'm like, well, like we're making, the stained glass of Sintra, whatever. But when the theme is really present there, I feel even better about telling the story behind the game and getting people into that atmosphere of like, yeah, this is what we're doing, we're gonna fight off some beasties or whatever.
Absolutely.
So it's fun for me to do that and to really bring people into the game and get them excited for it.
Yeah, two games that come to mind for that is our group. So the Bloody Inn, you know, when we
Mhm.
explained the Bloody Inn, oh, you make more money as a hotel owner by killing your guests. People are like, I want to play that. Uh, Another game is actually your game, Jamey, Euphoria.
Oh.
Uh, Telling people the theme behind Euphoria, people are like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That it's such a it I mean, and to even tie it back to the roll for thought ideas, the theme of the game, you want to keep your guys stupid. And that whole mechanic right there with your dice, then that automatically made sense, you know?
Yep.
And then even having the moral dilemma cards and everything, so much of that game kind of made sense with you taught the theme and then you taught me the mechanics and now I get the game. It's perfect. And it brings people in that theme for sure. The whole idea of you're in a dystopia and you want to build a better dystopia. And it's like that's just so cool, you know, and people gravitate towards themes like that
Yeah.
for sure.
I did bring that. I held that up as one of my examples because I know Melissa just did a great Teach the Teach video on Euphoria. And the example I thought of for it was related to what you just said about how you want to keep in a dystopia, you want to keep your workers happy but dumb. And that theme is throughout the entire game. And I think it maybe is best exemplified for the purpose of teaching in the commodity areas, where like if you have a bunch of workers there and they have a bunch of knowledge, um, you'll get more resources because you have a lot of people working together, but you also gain a knowledge because you have all these workers gathered together talking to one another.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know if that really helps understand the game all that much more than you would otherwise need to, but it as I'm explaining the game, I usually share that. I usually use that thematic explanation to show that's what it means. You're gaining knowledge because they're fairly abstract. They're dice with numbers on them. It's abstract, but if you throw that theme in there, it makes a little bit more sense.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, because those are the things that actually make me really excited about the game, where I start to notice those like nuances within the theme where the rule book
Mm-hmm.
might not have actually told me this, but like
Yeah.
something like that where it's like, yeah, they're like they're talking and so they're gaining knowledge, and when I start to notice those things, I'm like, oh, it's because of this is so cool,
Right.
or even like with War of the Ring where Sauron he keeps rolling these dice and he's losing these dice because he's so obsessed with finding the ring. Uh, like
Yeah.
noticing those things, I'm like, this is so cool, you know. So, and I think it gets other people excited as well when they come to those realizations. And I think that's what it's really all about, getting people excited to play games and having fun with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like Easter eggs are way more exciting than the bluntness of a game. Like in BSG, for example, it made so much thematic sense for everybody to have a second round of you find out if maybe you were a Cylon and you just didn't know it. And that's just a very obvious thing. But like you said with Euphoria, that like little nuance of there's a bunch of people gathered talking to each other so they gain the knowledge for going there. Like that's a very little Easter egg that I think everybody gets amped about that. I haven't met somebody that doesn't get excited about finding that small little Easter egg thing that's like, that's cool. That really shows some love and dedication kind of thing. Like,
I do have my last example actually ties right into that in terms of a way that I use theme almost to get people excited about it, and something that I get excited about when I play this game. Have you played Arctic Scavengers?
No, I actually don't know that one.
Me neither. That looks cool.
It's a post-apocalyptic deck building game. And one of the main things you do in the game is you kind of venture out into the wilderness and you dig through scrap piles of stuff because in the apocalypse, there's just scrap piles of everything all around. And in the game, that means that you draw, there's a certain deck, there's like a scrap pile deck, and you draw a bunch of cards depending on your dig ability. And so if you have a dig ability of 5, you get to draw 5 cards and pick one of them. And it's just, for me, that's really satisfying. I know some people want like full control, full agency over the game. It's a little bit random, but I love the mechanism of like digging through something and getting really good at digging through something so I can draw a bunch of cards and have my pick of all those cards. I love explaining that mechanism in that way when I teach this game. And that's one thing that gets me really excited about the theme. I like the idea of digging through and discovering stuff as I play.
Yeah, that is really cool. I think Justin and I were totally okay with randomness in games.
Yeah, as long as it made sense.
Yeah, we're Ameritrash players.
Absolutely.
It totally works for us. That actually sounds cool. I have to look into that game now.
Yeah, it's good.
Like the idea.
That even like reminds me of 1775 Rebellion, which is actually on my bed behind me. But so each thing, like the different armies that are part of it. So like the Patriot Militia versus the actual Continental Army. Continental Army is more well trained, so their dice have a more likelihood of hitting and less likely to flee. Things like that. I love when it's like you took a piece of randomness like the die roll and you tied it into your theme and now it works perfectly. Mm-hmm. I'm happy for that piece of luck in your game. I'm totally for it,
Yeah.
Me too, yeah. All right. Well, this has been another Roll for Thought. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Melissa McCack or our Room 51 Facebook page. Jamey, thank you so much for being here. We were very, very excited to have you. Yes. Where could people find you?
The hub for everything related to Stonemaier Games is stonemeiergames.com. There you can find Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. And YouTube. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And let us know what you think about this topic. What are some games that come to mind for you in teaching games with the theme propelling the rules and everything? You've been listening to / watching Room 51.
Thank you very much, man.
All right, take care. Yeah, have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God. Imagine he could still see it.
I know.
I don't even care. That was insane.
That was Jamey Stegmaier.
I know. I wanted to be like, by the way, I love your games.